Hi, this is Dr. Judith, and I'm here to talk about an area that I think we want to learn a little bit more about or have some awareness and just want to tweak. And this is personal savvy and leading with personal savvy during stressful times, during difficult times that you may find yourself in the work environment. And that work environment may be related to healthcare, in which you are a nurse or a APP or you're MD, or you may be a healthcare provider providing services in some capacity within that particular work environment, or it may be in the corporate environment in which you may have high levels of stress in terms of deadlines that need to be done and high levels of uncertainty in terms of what's coming up next and when it needs, and it may be related to long hours. And that can be in healthcare, that can be in corporate or business world, and especially if you're a small business, that you are providing many different types of activities to keep the business moving forward if you're small or mid-sized business. And also, you know what? We can have stressful times too, when it relates to when we're entrepreneur. And in that entrepreneur, we're really kind of, we do it all. You have to do it all and manage, and you may have a virtual assistant, but you're usually juggling many different balls, which is creating some degree maybe of stress and also some degree of difficulties as it relates to financial difficulties. We can always have our ups and downs with different seasons that we're going through. In terms of summertime may be down, but in the fall time, things may pick back up and then it may go back down again in the winter time, and then start to slowly pick back up in the springtime. Whatever your cycle of your business is, we may find that within that we may have stressful times too. And it also may keep us very busy. So we, in general, live in a very busy type of environment in our Western culture, as well it may be in your Eastern culture, wherever you are upon this planet. You may find pockets of stress that happens to you. And what I'm interested in is in giving you kind of 3 tips in order to be your best self in those stressful times. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about leading with personal savvy and what that means in terms of our moving forward in our discussion here. So when we think about being busy, we do think about going from feeling calm and like a fat cat, and then we shrink a little bit in those stressful times, and it results in us really having this kind of sense of frazzleness. And so I had asked individuals to give some thought to some pre-work, and those questions will come up later that I also will give you more time to think about. And so I'll turn off my camera and give you time to think as we're moving through this presentation. But I do want to say that stress mounts from many different directions, and it can create an anxiousness or feeling angst and an anticipatory anxiety because of degrees of uncertainty that we're having to deal with. Especially in the past when we've had to deal with COVID. There was a lot of uncertainty during that time. And a lot of us were at home and we had to deal with being at home when we were surely used to being more at work and moving forward and charging forward. And we had to learn how to adapt to that. And if you had a young family at home during the COVID time, that was another layer that was placed on that. And it's also, if you had elders that you were attending to, that was another layer of stress that was being placed upon you. And now that we've moved out of that COVID cycle, we're having now to adjust to be back in the work environment. Some want to go back 5 days, some want to go back 4 days, some want to go back 3 days in the work environment. But whatever the work environment that you're finding yourself in, you can also still have experiences that are creating more stressful times for you. And then how do you keep up with this personal savviness, this personal uniqueness of who you are, and show that and not allow the stress to kind of weigh you down or make you irritable or create a more reactivity to the people who are asking you the questions or people that are coming up to you and wanting to know more information, and you're feeling as if, as in your leadership role, that you're multitasking, trying to do a lot of things, and a lot of people are wanting something of you. And that sometimes creates this irritability and this frustration and this nonverbal cues that come up on our face that let people know that we're not happy campers with a particular situation that happened or a particular question that was asked of us. So they may not know that there's other things going on for us too, but we still have to learn how to lead in a savvy way that helps the team, or if we're in a team environment, to help them, our direct reports, to continue to move forward. If we're not in a team environment and we're more kind of entrepreneur, like those individuals that we're contacting and those individuals that are maybe supporting us in the different business that we do have, we still have to get into alignment and feel as if we're leading with a degree of composure and also the conservation of energy. That we are conserving our energy, knowing that usually if you're a solo type of business, you have long days. So it's really good to be able to pace yourself through those long days. But there are other things that create more stress for us too, and I'll talk about this stress continuum in a minute, is sometimes through the global activities that are going on around the world and within your own country, it can feel very stressful in terms of that degree, getting back to that underlined word there of uncertainty about what it's going to mean for my business, what it's going to be meaning for the type of work that I'm doing, be it in healthcare or be it in corporate or small business or whatever environment that may be in terms of the different industries. One of the things that we're looking at is how does this savviness relate to transactional and transformational leading? And what's the neuroscience behind that in terms of communication? So how can we move to being more kind of centered and balanced and not feel so afraid at the edges because of over time of a day or a couple of weeks or whatever, we're just feeling that we're really, really stressed and we're not using our best faculties to help us to move through the stressful times that we find ourselves in. So what do I mean by personal savvy? One of the things that research has shown in this whole aspect of personal savviness is that 85% of what leaders do impact relationships, impact ongoing interactions that we have with people, regardless of a small business to a large corporate entity. We're always dealing with individuals, and how we show up in those interactions becomes really, really important. And this is what I want you to think about in terms of personal savvy. Personal savvy, what is it to you? Think about it for a minute, and then I'm going to give you some different aspects and where they present themselves as personal savvy. So take a few minutes. I'm going to turn off my camera and think about it. What does personal savvy mean to you? How does it show up in the different types of areas that you find yourself interacting with? It may be within your organization. What does personal savvy look like? Remember, we take ourselves wherever we go. What is personal savvy? So I'll be quiet for a minute or so. Remember what I said is related to what I notice in my interactions, my personal, interpersonal relationships that we do have with individuals. And as Margaret really says, in organizations, real power and energy is generated through relationships. The patterns of relationships and the capability to form them are more important than tasks, functions, roles, and positions. So this is why we're talking about personal savvy. So as you wrote that down, what that means to you, let me share with you some thoughts about personal savvy. And what I want to say, you can think about it from the standpoint of a CEO savvy. It's one type of savviness. When confronted with a problem or situation, how would your CO see it? How would you deal with it? How do you show up in your presence with that particular type of problem or situation that's coming up? Another type of personal savvy is networking savvy. How are you with getting outside your comfort zone and getting to know people across functions and businesses, internally, externally, and your interactions with suppliers, for example? How do you show up in your interactions if you're in real estate, in which you're having to deal with many different people? And if you're in the building of different types of housing, that means there's some degree of personal savvy that is needed in the networking world. The other thought about personal savvy is this whole aspect of situation savvy. And with the situation savvy is how are you with getting people to do things they don't want to do, and however it still needs to be done. That, there is some degree of savviness that you use. Well, you may use a different word, but these are all the different types of personal savvy as I'm moving towards this quality of what I'm going to be talking about predominantly is your personal interpersonal savviness and how to be aware of its impact in stressful and difficult times. The other aspect of personal savvy is political savvy. It's another quality of savvy. Do you have a chorus of influential leaders singing your praises? Do you have individuals that are willing to go out and say the good things that are about you because they know that you're a good person, that you have a degree of integrity that just occur in the world of politics, but it also occurs in the world of business and our interactions that we do have with individuals, and how we go about being diplomatic in our conversations that we have with those particular types of individuals. There's also communication savvy, and this is getting closer to personal savvy that I'm going to be focusing on. And what that means is how are you with taking big ideas and be prepared to cut that 30-minute presentation into 3 minutes, that there is some degree of finesse that you have that you can be able to quickly think about how to take a lot of information and communicate very clearly in bite-sized pieces. It's another way of thinking about savvy. But the next piece that I want to talk about, because I want to hear there's these other different levels of savviness that's good to be able to have. But personal savvy is how are you with knowing who you are and what you stand for. Part of that is values, the values that we stand for, the strengths that we have, as well as our blind spots. We become more aware of our blind spots when people start sharing them with us. They say, did you know you were da-da-da-da, in that meeting? And you may say, no, I didn't think I was. And they may say, yeah, you were. Well, either you're going to react in a negative way, or you're going to react in a positive way. So thank you for letting me be aware of that. Then I'll be attuned to it the next time. Whatever that thing is, this is where that cultivating for yourself on awareness, cultivating for yourself humility as well. So with that in mind, I would like you to think about, in terms of our discussion today on personal savvy, what is that special something that's unique to you that gives you a chutzpah, that gives you kind of this quality of something unique about yourself. So what I'd like you to do, and I'll take a few minutes for you to do this, and I'll turn off my camera again, is to list your 3 strengths you use at work. 3 strengths that people have either told you about or people have commented about in some ways in terms of telling you about it, or something that you observe, or something you just know that these are your strengths that you do have. And once you think about those 3 strengths, think about how they show up, what makes that unique for you as we think about personal savvy. So now you're thinking about, what you wrote already about what your personal savvy does now, how does it tie into what are your views on personal savvy based on what we've talked about so far? So that's what I want you to take some time to give some more thought to. And I'll give you about 3 minutes to write down your thoughts, and then we'll move forward from there. And as you're writing that down, one of the things we're going to be looking at is personal savvy in leading yourself and others is this kind of quality that can trip us up in being able to express that personal savvy is going to be the next thing we talk about. But right now, we're just kind of anchoring in what are those 3 strengths that you use at work that you think are unique about you that come under this umbrella of personal savviness. You can either bullet it or you can write it out. But this is just good information to reflect back on, which may continue to evolve and grow as you're thinking about personal savviness in your work environment during times of stress. And we're going to be talking about that next. Remember, I said personal savviness is look at your strengths. So that's what you're seeing there on the screen. And you're wanting to see how that shows up and that uniqueness, that quality of specialness in how you portray yourself and show up in your interactions. And the other piece that you want to remember is what I said about 85% of what a leader does is really focused on developing their skills, their soft skills. And we're going to talk more about that. Not just their technical abilities. The technical abilities usually get you into the higher roles and positions and move you up the ladder of success. But what allows you to be effective in your role and even more successful, it is the soft skills, the people skills that become important. So that's why my question is, in terms of your personal savviness, is just be aware of how much do I understand who I am and what I stand for? And part of that is your strengths that you will have. And part of that is, how do I show up in my presence? So part of personal savviness is our presence and how we show up and how people interact with us and how comfortable we allow people to be in our presence and our interactions with them. Yet some people have a more formal style about them, which is fine. But is there something that allows the people around us as leaders to feel comfortable in their interactions with us? So we can have different styles, but we know that a part of the savviness is those individuals who are able to connect with that part of being personally effective and in personal effectiveness. They have a way of making people to feel more comfortable. So what were yours that you came up with? Think about them, look at them. They can evolve, they can change. But my three have been my intuition. My personal side is my intuition, my gut. It leads me very, very well in the work that I do. And then also, I'm very good at listening, summarizing what I hear people saying to me and interpreting what I hear, so that it's like using that sixth sense to be able to interact with what a person's bringing to my attention. In my leadership types of roles that I've had in my career, that has served me very well, and also allowed people to become more comfortable in their interactions with me because they knew that I really got them. I got what they were trying to say. I didn't brush them off. I listened and I was able to summarize, as I said earlier, and be able to get quickly into what were the issues, because many times leaders are dealing with problems that are coming their way that their employees want some answers around. And if you're in a solo type of business that you have to figure out some answers around, or if you have a support group of other workers in an entrepreneurship type of group, that you can utilize them to help you. But wherever we go as leaders, the more comfortable that people feel that they can bring their ideas and suggestions to us, it does allow people to feel as if this person is able to relate to me. There's a relatability factor that takes place. So think about those things as we're talking about this personal savvy, because it does require some level of you being able to acknowledge who you are, how you show up, how you go about thinking, and helping other people to understand you and for them to get more comfortable in their interactions with you. They can still be formal, but there's a comfortability factor, again, as I said earlier. So part of this quality of personal savviness is that you can have challenges that happen to you. And those challenges can be opportunities for learning about yourself, about some of the qualities that make you and how you stand up in terms of how you define yourself in terms of personal savviness. It may be qualities such as motivation, that you're able to motivate people to move them forward and help them to get things done. You're able to help them to self-reflect and make some shifts and changes in certain behaviors that they may be engaged in. It may be a personal savvy quality, maybe empathy. You really can feel and understand where a person's coming from, which is different from sympathy. But it's empathy, you can understand, you can ride alongside them, but you don't jump into the pool of their sympathy of what's going on with them, but they can feel that you get it and you understand, which is very powerful in itself. Some people and their qualities that they may list for themselves may be related to communication, that they're very good communicators. They're very good publicly. and being able to express their thoughts and express their ideas pretty readily and help people to get it and follow through with what they're asking to be done or getting them motivated. Like it's like motivation plus communication, is a nice, powerful quality that may be that extra savviness that you do have, that that you have, and you engage in order to help people to bring out the best in people. Another quality may be listening, as I mentioned in one of my qualities, that I'm very good with listening. And listening is one of those qualities that allows us to allow people to feel more comfortable with us and engaged in a dialogue going back and forth. And it also is one of those soft skills. All the things I'm talking about relate to soft skills that we need as leaders in order for us to be much more effective in our roles. And if you're already effective, then wouldn't it be nice to be that much more? Gratitude is another quality, that we are willing to be grateful for what people are doing within our organization or our direct reports, that they are sharing with us, and we give them an awareness that, oh, wow, that was great. You did that in a very succinct way. Or, yeah, I hear the struggle that you had there, but it seems like you came out of that struggle pretty well by doing blah, blah, blah. Or it may be related to that you're very good in the world of change, where we've been in so much in a change mode lately, that you're flexible and you're able to go with the punches. And as they're coming up, and as during stressful times, you're able to shift and be more willing to look at other options and moving in different directions to be more productive in the particular thing that you're doing. Another quality would be humility, or the kind of personal savvy, that there's a degree of which there's a humbleness to you. It doesn't mean that you don't have a thought about something and you're not going to express your views and you're not going to be assertive, but there's this humility that people feel and they pick up on, that you're not going to toot your own horn 24/7, 7 days a week, but there's a degree in which you do share what your accomplishment, but it's not from an arrogant standpoint. Then there's also confidence. It's another quality that may to lead you into that personal savviness of those three strengths that you do have, that some people are just naturally confident in their abilities, not arrogant, but confident in their abilities, and feel very good about what they do. And they feel very positive and strong about their perspectives and their thoughts about what needs to get done and how it needs to get done. The other quality, especially if you're in healthcare, in those high stress types of environments, it's just not within healthcare, it can be in other organizations where there are deadlines, and those deadlines are always changing, is a quality of calmness, that there's a degree that you can not be flappable, that you're calm, and people really appreciate that calmness that you're showing or you're displaying with them. But all of this is related to the quality of self-awareness. And not to say these individual qualities that I just named, these strengths that I just named, are not valuable. They are, but they do have the undercurrent of self-awareness, that you're aware about yourself, you're aware about your impact. And we're going to be talking more about self-awareness too, as it relates to personal savviness. So all this underneath that self-awareness is learning. We're willing to learn about ourselves. We're willing to know that there are times in which we're not going to always do everything right. And so leading with personal savviness is being able to be aware of the fact that you shift, you change when you need to shift, and you change. And I love this quote by Drucker, and that was, cultivate a deeper understanding of yourself, not only what your strengths and weaknesses are, but also how you learn, how you work with others, what your values are, as I mentioned earlier, and where you can make the greatest contribution in a particular project or a particular task that needs to be done, or a long-term perspective of something that you're working on. And maybe others can make the contribution in other areas. But that is that awareness of what makes you tick, or what you're good at, And also those things you may not be as great at, you're willing to strive to try to do better and be better. And when you operate from your strengths, you can achieve true excellence. So this is Peter Drucker in his quote. And it gets into that quality of learning. We're always continuously learning about ourselves, our weaknesses, learning about our areas in which we want to kind of fine tune more about ourselves in order to be our best self. So we see even the challenging situations that come up in all businesses and all individuals working in healthcare or corporate or in as entrepreneurs are going to have situations that are stressful at times. And how do you utilize those strengths? As we're talking about this personal savviness, how do you use, and those strengths that you wrote down, how do you use them to help you to navigate through those particular types of times and situations that you find yourself in? The other thing I like to talk about is how we move from these qualities of management that you can see on this here on this side, on your left side or right side, depending on how you're looking at this. And being aware of the fact that we sometimes have a lot of activities of managing ourselves, which we're talking about, but also activities around communication, relationships, and teams and our interactions with others on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the things I highlighted here was in managing ourselves is that we can have situations that personally, interpersonally, as well as professionally that are happening to us that we need to learn how to deal with the adversity and not spill over in terms of our interaction with other individuals. How do we are able to manage those adverse types of situations, but we're not taking it out on other individuals? In our communications, listening, and being able to be aware of our written abilities. And if our written abilities, we're finding we're better verbally, then how do we utilize that verbalness and then work on the written expressions of things that need to be said? As a leader, knowing that we want connections, and this is that interpersonal interactions that we're having, that we are aware that what motivates other individuals, that we're helping to give them ideas to help them to continue to grow and advance in a particular way. And also that there's always going to be internal and external stakeholders and making sure we're aware of their needs are and that we're meeting those needs in our leading capacity. And then, when it comes to the managing teams and leading, we're looking at influence and how we go about influencing. And all this ties into this personal savviness because we're aware of these particular types. We know how we interact when we're on a team or supervising other team members, or how effective we are when it comes to conflicts. And if we don't like conflicts, and that may be an area that we need to work on in order to increase our personal savviness and people feeling more comfortable around us. Because what happens is, I wanted to talk about this aspect that sometimes we think that transactions that we're doing day to day, what we need to do, but it's not necessarily transformational leadership, which is a component of this personal savviness that I want to bring to people's attention. That we sometimes get so kind of far into, well, I'm managing everything, I'm getting the tasks done, I'm making sure the projects are meeting their deadlines, I'm making sure the technical things are getting done. And that's all well and good. And that's all very helpful. But I'm talking about personal savviness. And part of personal savviness relates to transformational leading and how we go about leading. Because as I said earlier about that self-awareness, that is important, very important in terms of moving us into the transformational leading. And as we know ourselves more, and we look at situations in which we find that we become more stressful, sometimes that personal savviness can shrink. And that's where we have to not get so overly focused on just trying to get the task done and bowl over people in the process, but realize that in situations in which there's a lot of stress kind of taking on, can we take a step back and then we kind of observe ourselves and be aware of the fact that, I could have said that differently. I could have interacted a little bit differently there. in time of stress. And let me be more intentional about doing some of that in my interactions. And that builds greater personal savviness and people's willingness to be able to work with you because they see you making self-corrections, that you're willing to understand, okay, it's my stress here, and let me handle it, that you're able to maybe joke. That's another quality that maybe is a strength for some individuals that they have. They can joke about something and let off the steam around that and keep things moving forward. With this transformational leadership, which is a quality of this personal savviness, that we've been talking about it in some ways, we have to be attuned to the fact that there's 4 elements that relate to transformational leading. And as we're leading with personal savviness in times of stress situations, then we need to know and understand ourselves when we are calm and how we show up in our work environment, and when we're stressed and under difficult times and situations and how we show up, and start to have some coming together so that we are showing up consistently. Because what we have research has shown is leaders that show up in a consistent way builds trust. Leaders that show that they care, also is a quality that builds trust. Also, developing the relationships that we have, and we understand other individuals, and we help to share their perspective and views about things, builds trust. One of the savviness qualities is that the leader has a degree in which they're trustworthy, that they're willing to tell the truth with candor and care. As you see on this slide here, it says transformational leaders empower others, enabling them to achieve willingly. Whereas I think sometimes you see this other component too, so narcissistic leaders use their power over people to make them to do the things. And this is not over people. Transformational leaders try to work with people. And so this is where it becomes the individual stimulation. I like to talk about these 4 components that you see there, looking at transformational leadership and this quality of personal savviness, which is, again, a self-awareness that you have about yourself, and transformational leading is another quality. So when we talk about the intellectual stimulation, we're talking about some degree of creativity that you're able to bring to the equation, that you have specific goals, and those around you know those particular goals that you're trying to achieve. And that when there is challenges happen, you bring in the whole team to say, okay, what do we need to do here to be effective? And you don't feel as if it's only on you having to do this, that it can be. You're getting information from multiple sources, but yes, you make the final decision. But I'm talking about number 2, the intellectual stimulation. And I'll get back to number 1 in a minute. That you're willing to find ways in which you are utilizing the people that are around you, whoever they may be, to stimulate your thinking about the goals and the direction. Do they need to be modified? Do we need to be having to do them in a different way because the circumstances have changed? And then there may be the individual or individualized stimulation or considerations that need to be taken into consideration is degree, something I said when I talk about one of those strengths that we can have with personal savvy is empathy. That we show a degree of empathy and care and concern. We're more purposeful in how we go about engaging and interacting in the work environment. We are aware of our strengths and the skills that we do offer. And in the particular work environment that we are finding ourselves in. And with that, individual stimulation, or another way of saying individualized consideration, is a mentorship, that we're mentoring others, individuals, to be their best selves. And then we also may have a mentor that helps us as to continue to develop and to achieve our maximum potential as well. Then there is also the inspirational motivation, which is the number 3 there. And it ties into having a degree of positivity I think leaders do have some degrees of positivity and not being pessimistic to the point that it pulls down the morale within the organization. But they have this inspirational way by having a clear vision about what they're looking to achieve, and people are on board with that, and they feel really positive with what the leader wants to move forward with. And then there's also this degree of inclusiveness that everyone is working together to achieve the goal. And it's not favoritism that is showing certain favorites that they get the prime assignments, but the leader is very keenly aware of the fact that they want to have a greater impact and greater inspire each of the individuals on the team to do their best, or to make sure they're feeling a degree of inclusiveness in their interactions. And with that inspiration comes productivity. That productivity is happening and occurring in a very positive way because everyone feels motivated to move forward. Another quality, which we'll talk about now, is idealized stimulation or influence. Idealized influence may come in the form of the enthusiasm that you're able to give, the enthusiasm that you're showing. And these are the qualities of the inspirational leadership. So that stimulation that you have through the motivation and being positive and being enthusiastic, and you're embodying the values that you want your team to embody. You're walking your talk, and you're just not talking your talk, but you're actually walking your talk, and people see that and they enjoy seeing that in you, which brings up that quality of being a role model. And so you're showing how you would like your work environment to be. You're helping to increase the morale within that work environment. And it's allowing people to feel as if, yeah, we can do this. This is really, really good. We like this. So the other quote here is, leadership is not about titles. It is not about seniority. It is not about status. It is not about management. Leadership is about power and the ability to know when and how to use it to influence the people around you to do and become more, to become their best self. And transformational leadership is about using your actions to elevate others and put them in their path to greatness. And usually when we have been cultivating our personal savviness, then it ties right into this quality of that we're being our best, and we're allowing others to show up to be their best self too. And that we're learning through that mentorship of helping others to be able to do that when we see maybe there's some things that need to be tweaked, and we're willing to work with them, in that. So I want to give you 3 tips. So we've talked about personal savviness. We talked about a little bit transactional type of leadership, which has its place. We want to move towards is transformational leading. And in that transformational leading is that quality of self-awareness, the personal savviness, and the qualities, 3 qualities we talked about, and it could be more than 3 that we talked about, that you can bring to how you're going about leading, especially during difficult times, especially during times of stress that you may find yourself in. And how do you hold yourself and monitor yourself during times of stress so it's not leading in to your interactions with people, that they may know that, yes, you're under a lot of stress, but you're not showing it. You're not acting it out. You're not showing it in a way that makes people fearful of you or anxious to be around you. And that is a quality of savviness, of personal savviness. So the 3 things I'm going to talk about as quick tips for you to be attuned to is something called question thinking. And the next will be perspective taking. And the next will be know your tendencies that you do have. These are, again, for the personal savviness, we need to have these qualities of awareness. And when we are able to implement them, wow, we're on the road to be a personal best self, and also managing situations and during stressful times because of that greater self-awareness. One of the qualities that I would like to talk about in terms of tapping into this power that you have within yourself and knowing that there will be times in which, in the leading of yourself, you will have to tap into the inner aspects. As Mandela said, I learned that courage, and this is a quality you may have to tap into when times of stress and difficulty, was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. It's as if one of the things, as we're talking about this whole aspect of your own being the power of your internal self, that it's not that as a leader, you're not going to have fear and you're not going to have doubt at times, your uncertainties. You might have restless nights at times as well. But it's more of the quality of how courageous I be. How courageous can I show up? How can I still navigate around my fear and uncertainty? And what can I do through self-care and resilience to deal with those things that are coming up in my life? And how sometimes it's through exercise and activities that we do have, that we planned out that allows us to take off some of that stress that's going on. Some people like to, run. Other people like to knit. Other people like to do arts and crafts. Other people like to do bowling. Other people like to do cycling. Other people like walking. Whatever the quality is as a leader that you like to engage in that allows you to reduce some of that stress, the better it is because it lays the foundation for you to feel more courageous in how you need to approach something, because you don't have all this releasing of cortisols, which I'll talk about in a minute, in our body, which is creating, stress and distress for us. And let me just go back for a minute, because I did want to talk about one quality about stress is that, you've heard about the bell-shaped curve in stress. Yeah. And in that bell-shaped curve in stress, it can be from having not enough stress to having optimal stress that allows us to function and be well and move forward in the different tasks that are required of us. And then it can be too much stress. So that's what that bell-shaped curve is about. And when we're on the top of that, we're moving in the right direction, then we find that we're engaged. We're finding that we're doing well and we're feeling energized and we're feeling good about what we're doing in terms of that particular role, task, or activity that is requested of us to do or that we know that we need to do. When that bell-shaped curve starts to come down, it means that it may be what's called the tipping point. And that stress, that the environment that we find ourselves in that tipping point, is where we have to be aware of that we can lose focus. Not only lose focus, but make more mistakes or say things snappily. Or we may find that we disengage, from the conversation, or we quiet down, or it shuts us down in some ways in that stressful, high stress type of environment. And when we're experiencing more stress, then that may, over a long period of time, from acute stress to chronic stress, then that's where we may move towards burnout, which is a quality that I like to say is that, we're becoming more afraid. We're becoming more feeling as if we're at a breaking point for ourselves. And some of the ways in which we know that is when we have decreased levels of angst or feeling short-tempered, more angry, about things, or we're finding we're panicking more about things. We can't get a good night's sleep and we're worrying more. And so all this drains our energies, these kind of emotional components drain our energy. And it results in us, after a while, just not having enough energy and not having enough fuel in the tank, so to speak. And so we may find ourselves feeling more flat, not having energy. And that's why we talk about this whole quality of quote unquote burnout that can happen to people because of the increasing anxiety and panic and frustrations and irritabilities. And as leaders, as I circle back around, I just wanted to talk about this continuum of stress, because I realized I didn't get to that yet, and we're into talking about tips, about things that we will tend to be more transactional in our leading when we're under greater amounts of stress. Just get the task done, more short-tempered, not interpersonally interacting or communicating with the individuals that are helping us to get the job done and get the product out, whatever that might be. And so we want to know that we do want to maintain our personal savviness and transformational leading. And how do we do that? That goes back to making sure we have self-care in place, that we're more resilient, understanding our strengths that we do have. And I ask you to think about those 3 strengths that define your personal savviness. Do they relate to things that allow you to tap into during times of high stress? And then also what Mandela's talking about is that we have to have the courage to step over that, and that the fear that we may be having, but how can we do whatever that courageous thing is to be able to do? For example, sometimes the courageous thing to do is to be able to apologize for our behavior or for a comment that we made, or for a meeting where we maybe acted up in a way and that we know wasn't our best self. And sometimes the courageous thing to do is to apologize or to acknowledge another person's when they try to help us with something. So let's move into the question thinking component of this as one of your tips that I said I was going to talk about. And when I talk about question thinking, this is something that allows you to move out of the amygdala response. When we're really stressed in difficult types of situations, we usually have activated, which most people have heard of, the amygdala, which is a small kind of component within the brain, and that moves us into fight, fright, freeze, or appease. Fight, fright, freeze, or appease. And we need to be able to find a way to breathe when we're feeling ourselves stressed, because when we're having that fight, freeze, or appease, usually in that cortisol release, we can feel that our heart racing, we can feel the sinking in our stomach, we can feel that we're unfocused in our thoughts. We may feel it in different ways that are taking place, and use that as warning signs for yourself. Then what you can be able to do is this quality of question thinking. And this is something that was developed by Marley Adams, which had taken her seminar probably about almost 2 decades ago, but it's something that stays with me, and I want to share it with you. And the question thinking is, and I've tied it to the neuroscience of our communication that takes place. And with that is, you need to ask yourself certain questions to activate the prefrontal cortex, which is this part, the prefrontal cortex of your brain. For example, how long has this situation been going on? You ask yourself, well, how long has this been going on right now that I notice, this pattern that's happening and us not getting this work out the door? And then you want to ask, what might be missing to this? So you're asking yourself more questions as a leader, and also maybe within your team, in order to get clarity about what's going on, to reduce some of the angst that people may be experiencing and the uncertainty that they may be experiencing. And who are the players involved? Maybe it's not the whole team that's creating some of the challenges that are going on. Maybe a small segment of the team, and that they maybe need more guidance and more clarity to take place to help them to be able to get on the right track with things. And then, am I clear and realistic about what I want? Because sometimes we may be very demanding, and the team is maybe very tired, and they're not going to be able to perform at that level, but they are able to give a piece. So we may have to go back and say, let's see what pieces of this that we can break down. And some of this, let's kind of get it out the door, and the others we can be able to follow up with later. Sometimes that's available to you. And then, am I aware of other stressors contributing to not only your stress, but also the stress of your team? If you're working in a team environment that may be related to, even after the pandemic, that they're still having to deal with some maybe team members, even though this is, now a year or 2 years, as we're going to be moving into after the pandemic, but it may still have its residual impact upon individuals and your team, and you want to know these things. So you want to think, you're thinking about these things in a questioning way and with your team to see what is getting our way. What are the personal triggers that are going on for me? What are the triggers that are going on for my team? And how can we work together to be able to manage these types of situations. And if you look at back to your personal savviness and you look at those strengths that you noted as your personal savvy, that ties into this transformational leadership because you're utilizing those qualities. For example, one of my qualities was intuition. So my intuition may clearly tell me something. There's something else I need to explore, another question I need to ask because I think we're stuck. And I need to bring that up to the team that I think we're stuck. And that's why we're not moving forward. What do other people think? What do you think we may be stuck around? I can tell you my thoughts. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And because when you become more collaborative and are working together as a team, the more the team continues to see us leading in a positive way. And knowing that there will be times we get stuck. There will be times in which things are not going to work out is the way we want them. And that we have to pivot and make a turn because that then allows us to begin to create a different direction or a modified direction that we need to move in. And so give that some thought as question thinking and how you might apply it and integrate it into what we're talking about and what you right now in terms of personal savviness and in this process of transformational leading of others and how it may show up within your particular type of work environment. The second tip is double click. And double click is a concept that was actually developed by a person named Judith. And she had wrote a book that has been really, really helpful in looking at how we need to show up and interact and be ourselves. I'll put the book in the down below in the comment section because I think it's going to be helpful. But I want to first talk about what this double clicking is. And the double clicking is related to just like you have a mouse, you double click and it opens up a bigger screen to things, that we do need to double click and open things up to have a greater perspective taking about things. And because we may see things from different perspectives on our team and with the different projects that we may find ourselves on, and we may be saying different things, but it's all the part of the elephant that we're saying. And so this perspective taking, I think is really helpful because even we may see things again from different elevations and different on the ground as we're traveling. So we first want to do is seek to understand what other people may be wanting us to know. And so we ask, what's happening here? And what is it that you would helpful for me to know that I may not know about? So you keep that perspective taking, you keep things open, you see things from a higher elevation. And you're trying to go up on the elevator, Empire State Building, and go up and see the greater view, what's going on, and helping, and people are helping you to be able to do that. So sometimes during stressful and difficult times, we do need to press the pause button in our thinking, because we may think we know what needs to happen, we know how it needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and we have to press that pause button if we're trying to take a greater perspective. And by doing that, we're asking ourselves, back to that other slide, is what is it I need to see that I'm not seeing? What is it I need to see that I'm not seeing? And start to develop number 3, which is hypothesis. Maybe I need to look at it from this perspective, and this will tie into this. Or maybe I need to look at it from this perspective, and this ties into this over here. Or maybe I need to ask that, and the assumptions that I'm making, the appropriate assumptions. So it means that you have an understanding of what the assumptions that you are making. So you write them down. This is what I'm assuming about this. This is what may be creating more stress in the work environment, or creating during difficult times, or with this project, or with the morale within the particular division or department or clinic or business, that you are working in. And then the other thing we have to be willing to do for ourselves in this perspective taking is observe and adjust. Observe what we notice and what types of maybe thinking that we're engaged in that narrows our perspective, and that we need to open up that perspective about things. And then think about what are the adjustments that I need to make internally within myself about this. Sometimes it may be impatience, that you need to just kind of be more patient, then that things are working themselves through. Sometimes it may be speeding things up and helping and asking the group, can we speed this up and on the notch here without necessarily the group feeling as if you're overly stressing them, as well. But as you observe yourself and your interpersonal interactions that you're having with others, and you're observing other people's interactions and on the team that is taking place, that observation, along with seeking to understand and pausing and thinking about this from a different perspective, and the hypothesis taking allows you to move you into adjusting appropriately in the environment, all because you were willing to double click on the particular situation or circumstance or people issue that you found yourself in, and the environment that may be stressful or difficult, and having to talk and take a perspective about it that allows you to be able to navigate in a different way. So the third tip that I wanted to say, and it's kind of has an A and a B to it. Well, let me ask you this question for you to think about it. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to write down what your thoughts are about this. And that is, what creates more chronic stress? IQ, EQ, or both? And why might that be? So take a minute, think about it. I'll give you a few minutes. Turn off my camera. What did you think? What creates more chronic stress? You may think because this iceberg is underneath that it's EQ, but not necessarily. It can be our IQ. Because there's certain qualities that IQ have that we're going to talk about in part B in a minute, that you really can create the amygdala hijack that I alluded to earlier about. During times of difficulty and stress, when we become more chronic, there's acute stress that's kind of more kind of situational, but chronic stress is occurring over a longer period of time and protracted over a longer period of time. And when stress is happening over a longer period of time, it may be over months or sometimes years, that we're chronic, this whole low chronic stress is happening, it does have an impact upon us, a hyperarousal all the time. That we think this hyperarousal is a part of who we are, and that when we have a long vacation and able to get some rest and to be able to unplug from things, we realize, wow, that's that other part, that the former me is not me. And so we don't realize the subtleness of how stress and difficulties over a period of time does have its wear and tear on us. And so when we are very, very stressful, we have to be aware of the fact that what are our signs? And what do we notice, especially under chronic stress? What do we know is happening for us? Do we find that we get more insensitive to other people's perspectives about things? That we get more short in terms of our patience, in terms of being irritated or frustrated or annoyed with individuals? That under levels of stress, we have the dread syndrome. And that dread is we're dreading having to get back into work again and having to do this job, or whatever that job may be, because over a period of time, it just keeps us hyperly aroused. That's where the amygdala comes in, the cortisol release, and that we're hyperly aroused about, the situations. We find that we calm a little bit down on the weekends because we don't have to worry about work. And then on that Sunday, we start again building back up and feeling more and more stress. And we're having to figure out another way of being. We have to figure out another way of being. And this is where EQ And that emotional intelligence comes in and becomes really important. And so we want our light bulb to be on with EQ and not on with IQ. And ultimately, what we want to do is have the integration of our IQ and EQ to be at our best in our interactions. One of the other things I thought this was a kind of a nice thing of kind of summarizing this is that after a long day or a long week that we have, we can really feel really really afraid. We can feel as if, as I'm talking about this chronic stress, that we're on a campfire and being stirred, and it's mounting for us. And so that's when having these particular strengths, this personal savvy question mark that I asked you to think about, becomes really particularly helpful for us in engaging it. And so with getting back into the IQ and EQ and the question that I asked you, I think it's a combination that is IQ can make us more stressful if we're only using IQ and not supporting ourselves with EQ awareness, because these are some of the qualities in terms of knowing the tendencies that may happen for you. Is kind of as a tip. Tip 3B is a high concentration, that you can concentrate on something that needs to get done. But when we're feeling more chronic stress, we will find that our concentration starts to wander or wane a little bit more. Intense focus, IQ allows us to have an intelligent emotion, which allows us to have an intense focus about things. But when we're under chronic stress, we find our focus is not as strong. It can be hyperactivity, and that we may become even more hyper about things because of what's happening in the situation, or what's being requested of us, or what we're having to get done. In chronic types of situations, our actually comprehension may decrease. But if it's kind of in a normal type of situation, our comprehension is really good for IQ. And intellectual skills may be really helpful, but under stressful situations, it may end up creating more distress. We become a little bit more cloudy in our ability to analyze something because of the stress level that we find ourselves in. When there's not a lot of stress going on, our ability to multitask, even though science is showing more and more, it's better not to multitask. But because of having the IQ, your capacity, you can be able to do that for a period of time. But under stress, that becomes less so. Or we may be hyperly focused too much on something is the other side of that. And then during low stress, we can have excellent memory about things, but under high stress, it may get a little bit foggy or less clear about things. But what we have found through some of the research is EQ is really helpful in order for us to manage prolonged levels of stress and not get into this reactivity and getting into this limited level of thinking about things. EQ becomes really, really helpful. EQ helps us to have the spring in our sneakers, as you can see there in our stat. It is sometimes the missing element during times of leading and doing high stress and difficult types of situations, because the more that we have cultivated and developed that self-awareness, and the more that we've cultivated and developed that regulation, that emotional regulation of ourselves, that we know when we're getting fueled up and becoming more angry or frustrated, and we're able to pull ourselves back from it, or take a break, or go for a walk, or do something different. These are tying into the inner power that exists within you through EQ that you're tapping into to utilize to help you to manage a situation, because you're willing to regulate yourself, and also willing to say, this is not an indicator of me being at my best. And I'm trying to figure out ways to be at my best. And part of that sometimes is I may need to be able to make sure I'm taking vacations on a regular basis. That helps me to regulate and not always feeling chronic stress, but be aware that through the vacations, it allows you to get a sense of assuredness, composure, a centeredness, more balance in your life, and doing things that you love and you enjoy doing on vacation. The other aspect is you understand when you're utilizing your EQ capacities, that what motivates you, what motivates other individuals, and knowing that what allows them to calm down just as much as you're aware of what calms you down, and that there's a degree of empathy that you're not you're not allowing yourself to um, be callous, I guess. But you're being empathetic to your own self and saying, okay, this is a stressful situation. I don't like how I showed up there. And I don't feel great about this situation over here. Okay, it's my warning sign. I need to do something different. With that emotional awareness, it allows you to be able to challenge yourself to say, I want to be balanced, centered, and I want to use my savviness to help me through these times of difficulty and stressful situations, persons, or circumstances that you may find yourself in. And therefore, one of the things that you have developed is good social skills, social interactions, interpersonally, and other people can support and help you in your leading capacity during times of stress and during times of difficulties that you may find yourself in professionally or personally. All these become really, really helpful to you. What I would say is during chronic stress, we tend to maybe want to gear more into being just getting the job done in the IQ way, but instead what we need to do is engage more in the EQ way and continue to feel that self-awareness I've periodically talked about through this presentation today, and be aware of the other qualities that go underneath the EQ, becoming the missing element, the missing piece, the puzzle piece that allows us to be effective as leaders and continue to on that pathway as being a transforming leader in our interactions and in our organizations as well. As we're running down here, I thought it would be nice to be able to hear some of the comments that other leaders have talked about, in looking at how we can really move from this feeling chronic stress and strain and moving in that capacity of not having enough fuel in our tank, and being attuned to that there are ways in which we can keep ourselves anchored and helping ourselves on a daily basis to be at our best. And part of that is the power of courage, as we talked about, what Mandela talked about, but also some of these others have said, and I put this up here because I thought they were really helpful as we're thinking about leading yourself, and then also as you're leading others. The true test of leadership is how well you function in a crisis, during those times of acute stress and chronic stress that may go on. And then when we're able to look at that and then modulate or modify what we need to, we're doing really, really well then. Then also the other quality, as Einstein said, is a leader is one who out of clutter brings simplicity. There's a quality of simplicity that the leader is looking for, and the complexities that may be going on in the situation, the triggers that may be happening in the situation, that there can be the simplicity about, okay, I think we just need to do this over here. We should be fine. And then out of discord, harmony, and out of difficulty, opportunity. That's what leaders see. This is moving ones into being not only savvy, but transforming how you're leading and how you're engaged in that leadership capacity. And then, as Brene Brown says, you can choose. You can choose courage, or you can choose comfort, but you cannot choose both. And part of leading and being as a savvy leader and a personal awareness about yourself is usually you want to lead with courage and knowing that you're not always going to do it right, it's not always going to happen right, but you're doing your best each and every way. So this approach of moving into transformation leadership is first and foremost having awareness of this personal savvy, the strengths that you bring, the uniqueness, the specialness that you bring to your particular role or roles that you're functioning in your organization. Then it's also this quality of observation of yourself, that self-awareness. And then know your tendencies, know what your triggers are, know how you show up during times of stress, and monitor those types of situations and reactions, and then adjust, to it, in a positive way, in a helpful way, which grows you and grows those that are around you and grows your team. Leading with transformational leadership does require some degree of communication to your team as well as to yourself, and having conversations that are helpful and meaningful in the interpersonal interactions that you're having with other individuals, that allows them to feel as if you get them and they get, what is that? You get it and you get them. And they get what you're trying to do in terms of your vision and your direction that you're trying to move in, and they're on board with that. I would like to kind of end by saying quickly that there are stresses and strains that are going to be within any type of work environment. There are going to be pressures that will go on. And what I've been talking about in this transformational type of leadership is being understand the neuroscience of the cortisol and the release of the cortisol that takes place that moves us from either approaching or trying to avoid situations. And through courage, we want to approach. And through active communication and talking to your team and talking to your own inner self about what you need to be able to do to stay on point, allows you to be able to move things forward in a positive way, allows you to take a perspective about things when you need to. And that perspective taking allows you to have different perceptions about what is and what isn't going on, and what needs to change and how it may need to change, and using the value of your team and their thoughts and feelings and reactions to be able to help you to be effective in leading and help them to be effective in the tasks and projects that they find themselves in and having to do. And with that being said, I think personal savviness is a wonderful quality, and to be able to give some more thought about, see how it shows up for yourself. And so one of the things I would like to leave you with is take time to reflect on one situation that you had recently or in the past, and how might these tips that I've just finished talking about be helpful in leading forward, utilizing them, experimenting with them, and seeing if they apply, see if they don't apply. Add something else if it's more helpful to you as you're managing, supervising other individuals and leading in your capacity in your organization. Thank you. This is all about the power of you, discovering yours and others' uniqueness, and also ultimately it's about being your best self in whatever you do. Bye for now. Take care.